This show is part of One Place, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to our morning roundup. We have a heavy slate of news today as the conflict in the Middle East widens. Here is what we are tracking.
The U.S. has confirmed that 6 American soldiers were killed in an Iranian missile strike on a base in Kuwait.
Legal experts and political leaders are debating whether Operation Epic Fury is a legitimate preemptive strike or a high-stakes gamble for regime change.
A growing rift is emerging within the MAGA base as prominent supporters question the administration's pivot toward a new war.
The State Department has issued an urgent directive for all U.S. citizens to leave 15 countries across the Middle East immediately.
Voters in Texas and North Carolina are heading to the polls today for primary elections that will test the strength of Trump-aligned candidates.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem faces a Senate hearing today amid a month-long agency shutdown and controversial immigration enforcement deaths.
First Lady Melania Trump has taken the rare step of chairing a UN Security Council meeting focused on children in conflict zones.
A deposition involving Hillary Clinton regarding the Epstein files was abruptly halted following a leaked photo from inside the room.
Authorities in Austin have identified the victims of a weekend bar shooting that the FBI says may have a nexus to international terrorism.
And on a lighter note, new data shows that electric vehicle batteries are actually outlasting their expected lifespans by a significant margin.
Now, let's get into our top story. The human cost of the escalating conflict with Iran hit home this weekend. U.S. Central Command originally reported 3 deaths following an Iranian strike on a military facility in Kuwait, but by Monday that number had doubled to 6. 1 soldier succumbed to injuries, and 2 more bodies were recovered from the rubble. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed that a missile managed to evade our air defenses and strike a tactical operations center. What's particularly concerning, according to reports from CBS, is that these service members were in a makeshift office space, essentially a trailer, that some officials are now questioning was adequately fortified, even with the 12-foot concrete barriers in place.
It's a tragic development, especially considering Kuwait has long been seen as a relatively stable hub for the 13,000 American troops stationed there. But this wasn't the only chaos in the region. We also saw an incident of friendly fire in Kuwait on Monday, where 3 U.S. fighter jets were downed. Footage showed them spiraling to the ground, though fortunately the pilots ejected safely. Iran's state media tried to claim credit for shooting them down, but the U.S. military is maintaining it was an internal error. This all comes as Iran continues to retaliate against U.S. allies, launching missiles at Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Qatar. It's no longer just a localized skirmish, it's a regional conflagration.
Next up, we need to look at the strategy behind these strikes.
The joint U.S.-Israeli operation, codenamed Operation Epic Fury, is being framed by the administration as a necessary preemptive move. Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump have both used language suggesting this is the beginning of the end for the Iranian regime. Netanyahu spoke about the brave Iranian people removing the yoke of tyranny. But legal scholars are raising red flags. Under international law, a preemptive strike is only legal if the threat is imminent, meaning there's no time for deliberation. Critics argue that because this operation was planned for months, it doesn't meet that standard. It looks more like a preventive war aimed at regime change, which is a much harder sell legally and diplomatically.
And the economic ripples are already being felt. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical oil choke point, and with Iran threatening to close it, Brent crude prices have surged to their highest levels since last summer. We're talking about 20% of the world's oil and liquid natural gas flowing through that narrow passage. If it's blocked, we're looking at a global energy shock that could dwarf anything we've seen in recent years. Gulf states like the UAE and Qatar are terrified of an uncontrolled Iranian collapse, fearing it would lead to millions of refugees and a power vacuum filled by militias similar to what we saw in Libya and Syria.
Now let's shift to how this is playing out at home.
President Trump campaigned on a platform of no new wars, but this conflict is putting that promise to the test. We're seeing a real fracture in the MAGA coalition. Conservative figures like Tucker Carlson and Matt Walsh are being incredibly vocal. Carlson went as far as to say this is Israel's war and not in the interest of American national security. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene has been critical, telling Megyn Kelly that America first should mean focusing on domestic issues, not getting American soldiers killed for foreign interests. It's a fascinating ideological split because the administration is trying to frame this as correcting decades of cowardice, but a significant portion of the base isn't buying the justification.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio didn't help quiet those concerns when he admitted that the U.S. knew an Israeli strike was coming and that it would likely trigger attacks on American forces. He argued that we had to strike first to prevent even higher casualties. But for the America First crowd, that sounds like the U.S. is being dragged into a conflict by an ally's agenda. This internal pressure is mounting just as Congress prepares to vote on bipartisan war powers resolutions this week. If those pass, it could significantly limit the president's ability to escalate further without a formal declaration or specific authorization. While the political battle rages in D.C., the situation for Americans abroad has become critical.
The State Department's warning is about as stark as it gets. Depart now via commercial means. They've listed 15 countries, including Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, and the UAE. The problem is that many flights have already been canceled or suspended. There are estimated to be between 500,000 and 1 million Americans living in the Middle East, and right now, Washington hasn't organized any government-led evacuations. People are being told to check with embassies, but the embassy in Jerusalem already said it can't directly assist with departures right now. It's a chaotic situation for travelers and expats alike.
Other countries are moving faster. France has already announced they are ready to use military flights to get their citizens out. And the UK is urging its 300,000 nationals in the region to register for support. The scale of this is unprecedented. When you have hundreds of thousands of people potentially stranded in a war zone that spans nearly the entire region, the logistics of a safe exit are a nightmare. We're seeing reports of people trying to reach border crossings like Taba into Egypt, but even there, the U.S. Embassy says it can't officially recommend the route because of security risks.
Now, let's look at a disturbing incident on U.S. soil. In Austin, Texas, authorities have identified 3 victims of a shooting outside a bar popular with University of Texas students: 19-year-old Ryder Harrington, 21-year-old Savitha Shan, and 30-year-old Jorge Pedersen. All lost their lives when a gunman opened fire early Sunday morning. The suspect, Ndiaga Diagne, was killed by police, but it's what they found afterward that has everyone on edge. Diane, a naturalized citizen from Senegal, was reportedly wearing a sweatshirt that said "Property of Allah," and a search of his home turned up an Iranian flag and pictures of Iranian leaders. The FBI is now officially investigating a potential nexus to terrorism linked to the war.
Governor Greg Abbott has vowed that state and federal officials will pursue every lead to see if anyone else was involved. It's a terrifying thought that the regional war in the Middle East could be inspiring lone wolf attacks here at home. The police response was incredibly fast. They confronted the shooter within 57 seconds. But the damage was already done. With the SXS-12 festival starting soon, security in Austin is going to be under a microscope. This incident really underscores the fear that international escalation doesn't stay over there. It has a way of radiating outward in very violent ways. In the midst of this, there was a significant moment at the United Nations. First Lady Melania Trump presided over a Security Council meeting on children and education in conflict. This is the first time a spouse of a world leader has ever chaired such a meeting. Her message was focused on education as a tool for peace, but the backdrop was incredibly tense. Just 2 days prior, Iranian officials claimed a strike hit an elementary school in Minab, killing 153 people. Iran's UN ambassador called the U.S. hypocritical for leading a meeting on protecting children while being involved in strikes that hit schools. The First Lady did offer condolences to the families of fallen U.S. service members, but she didn't explicitly address the specific military operations or the reported civilian casualties in Iran.
It's a difficult diplomatic tightrope to walk. While the First Lady talks about a swift and smooth recovery for the injured, the UN Undersecretary General pointed out that schools across the Middle East, from Israel to Oman, have had to move to remote learning because of the missiles. The U.S. military says it's looking into the Minab school incident, but Secretary Rubio has been adamant that the U.S. does not deliberately target schools. Regardless of intent, the optics of chairing a session on child safety while the region is in flames are drawing intense scrutiny from the international community. Turning back to domestic policy, a major cabinet member is in the hot seat today.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Her agency has been shut down for nearly a month because of a budget deadlock, and it's having real-world effects. TSA agents are working without pay, making air travel a mess. But the real fire is going to be over immigration enforcement. There have been 2 high-profile deaths of U.S. citizens at the hands of immigration officers in Minneapolis recently, including 37-year-old Alex Preddy. Noem initially labeled Preddy a domestic terrorist, but oversight reports have since contradicted that narrative. Senator Chuck Grassley has said that while officers should be protected, immigration enforcement and dignity aren't mutually exclusive.
Noem is also overseeing the administration's massive effort to deport 1 million people a year, interior deportations have reportedly increased fivefold in the first 9 months of the second term. Democrats are demanding changes, like requiring officers to wear body cameras and prohibiting them from wearing masks to hide their identities. Republicans are pushing back on the mask ban, saying it leads to doxing of federal agents. It's a total stalemate at a time when the agency is also struggling with national disaster relief. Noem's leadership is being questioned from both sides of the aisle, with some Republicans even calling for her resignation over the handling of the Minnesota situation.
Meanwhile, another high-profile figure was facing lawmakers, though in a very different setting.
Hillary Clinton sat for a deposition with the House Oversight Committee regarding the Jeffrey Epstein files. It was a closed-door session, but the committee released video of it. About an hour in, things got heated when Clinton's lawyer discovered that a photo from inside the room had been leaked to the public. A lawmaker eventually admitted to sharing a photo, but claimed it was taken before the hearing officially started. Clinton was visibly upset, saying, "I'm done," as the deposition hit a pause. Both she and Bill Clinton have denied any knowledge of Epstein's crimes prior to his 2008 guilty plea. But these depositions are part of a broader push by House Republicans to dig deeper into those old connections.
It's a reminder of how much the Epstein case continues to haunt political circles. The Clintons had actually asked for public hearings to avoid this kind of leaked drama, but they were forced into these closed-door sessions under threat of contempt. The fact that a photo leaked anyway just feeds the narrative of a hyper-partisan environment where even legal depositions become fodder for social media points. We'll have to see if any new information actually comes out of the full testimony once it's all processed.
Now, let's look at the big political test happening today.
It's primary day in Texas and North Carolina. In Texas, the big story is the GOP Senate primary. You have the incumbent, John Cornyn, who's been there since 2002, being challenged from the right by Attorney General Ken Paxton. Paxton is framing himself as the true Trump ally, despite his own legal troubles, which he claims are politically motivated. Then you have Congressman Wesley Hunt, who could pull enough votes to force a runoff. On the Democratic side, they're hoping to flip a seat for the first time in 30 years, with Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico facing off. They're betting that voter concern over the cost of living and the change for the worst direction of the country will give them a window.
North Carolina is just as interesting. Former RNC Chair Michael Whatley has Trump's endorsement for the Senate seat, but he has to get through a primary where his opponents are trying to out-MAGA him. If he wins, he'll face former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper in the fall. Redistricting is also a huge factor this year. Trump personally asked Texas lawmakers to redraw maps to favor Republicans, and North Carolina's legislature did the same. It means there are fewer competitive House seats in the general election, so these primaries are essentially where the final decisions are being made. We're also watching to see if Latino voters in Texas, who moved toward Trump in 2024, will stay with the GOP given the new, tougher immigration enforcement policies.
Finally, we have a bit of good news from the world of technology and some winter fun.
For years, the big fear with electric vehicles was that the batteries would die and cost $20,000 to replace. But new data from tens of thousands of vehicles shows that EV batteries are actually lasting much longer than anyone expected. It turns out that real-world driving, with all its stops and starts, is much gentler on batteries than the continuous drain tests engineers used in the early days. Plus, better temperature management software is keeping them healthy. So, if you're worried about your EV battery giving up the ghost after 5 years, the data says you can probably breathe a sigh of relief.
And if you're looking for a distraction from the news, Madison, Wisconsin just finished its Frozen Assets Festival. They have the only 5K race in the country that takes place entirely on ice. They've been tracking when their lakes freeze for over 100 years, and it's a huge part of the local culture. Ice fishing, ice sailing, even skydivers landing on the frozen water. It's a nice reminder that, even in a world full of geopolitical tension, there are still people out there flying kites on frozen lakes and celebrating the season.
That's our roundup for this morning. This situation in the Middle East is moving fast, and we'll be following every development.
Thanks for joining us. For more in-depth analysis and to ensure you get both our free and subscriber-only editions every day, make sure to subscribe to the One Place Network. We'll be back this afternoon with more updates. Have a safe day.